Exciting, thrilling, awesome. Let's take a look.
What's up, Met fans? Welcome back to Talking Mets it. Rob, how is everybody doing on this Thursday, December 29th, day 8 of the Carlos Correa, I guess you can call it a saga, a situation, an unknown, lack of clarity, whatever title you want to give it. It has been to the point where it's now frustrating for Mets fans. There hasn't been enough news to give any clarity on the situation. We got a little bit today that didn't really tell what has been directly going on in the conversations, which I'm assuming both sides want it that way, specifically Steve Cohen. And we'll get to the quotes that were in the latest article earlier today by Jack Ramsey and Michael Mayer in Metsmerized Online. There is still a lot of speculation of why is it taking so long? Is it the term of the contract in regards to the years and the money? Is that changing? Or is it just the language in the contract and they're going through it with a fine comb and basically going over every sentence, every word, just to make sure every time, every little thing that they're going over, is it basically every word of the contract just to make sure nobody missed it. In this particular article, if you haven't seen it, I did post it on my community page with the link so you guys can go right on it. And of course, I'll read you the main quote that Jack Ramsey put that was, I'm assuming, found out or quoted from Steve Cohen from a source that I'll read in a few seconds. But if you want to read it on your own time, it's a pretty good article. It's a decent amount in the article. So I'm just going to briefly talk about it. But the most important thing is what was quoted here from a source in regards to Steve Cohen and what he said is the fact that there's still speculation of what is the real issue. Is it just the injury? Did the Mets have second thoughts about the contract and the term of the contract because of this ankle injury with the plate in the ankle? You just don't know. And I don't think it's the fact that it's taken so long that people are getting upset at. I think it's the lack of news, basically, about it. Like, I get Cohen, and it seems like Boris at this point don't want leaks, right? They clearly agreed that they don't want to have leaks within their own parties about whatever's been going on, because there's a lot of movement going on, which I'll say in a second. So it's clear that both sides don't want stuff leaked. And there was a little bit that got leaked out that pissed off Cohen, and he actually, or at least a source says that Steve Cohen said this in the article. So it's interesting to see that part and a little bit of a leak coming from the Mets front office, which Cohen is not happy about. It is very interesting to as many report it, basically baseball has basically stood still, right? There was, one or two trades that are minor trades, nothing crazy, but it's basically been like a widespread MLB freeze ever since this whole Correa thing happened, basically overnight when the Mets agreed to a deal with Carlos Correa. And it's been 8 days since that. And we're still, ever since the Friday of the concerns of the physical, hasn't really been anything noteworthy that involves the contract itself. And you would think all the reporters from national to local would have something. And even, the famous arson judge, John Heyman, who is close to Steve Cohen and Scott Boras, even him can't even get the juicy details that we're all waiting for to at least get a little bit of information of the situation. And once again, I understand both sides, especially in the Steve Cohen side, don't want to have anything leaked out, because any detail that might hurt either side definitely could hurt the contract. And you know what? If a leak gets out and that's the thing that blows up this contract and blows up the deal, and they both go their separate ways, then it was a weak negotiation from both sides. And if it's that much of a, if they're in a glass house right now and they can't have a rock thrown at it, and it's that fragile, then it's not a match made in heaven. You might as well just go your separate ways. And it comes down to the fact, I don't think the Mets should wait until the end of this week. I think after this weekend's over, I just move on, because I think it's what it's doing. It's affecting you, because there was some reports that Trey Mancini has been talking to the Cubs in regards of a contract. So that would be another guy off the table. And the last person that is available in the free agent market is Adam Duvall if Trey Mancini goes to the Cubs. And, when you have the hype of Carlos Correa and then you get Adam Duvall, it's a much, you're going downhill in that aspect. It's not getting better, clearly. I think most people would rather have Carlos Correa, regardless of the money and the years. It's a guy that you can put in your lineup that will change the lineup. I know there's some people that are talking about, oh, it's not like Carlos Correa is going to, make a big difference in this lineup. Well, then you haven't been paying attention to Carlos Correa and what he's done. And if you go back to 2019 in particular, where Carlos Correa had the most RBIs in his career, was the only time in his career he finally batted in the middle of the order for the majority of the year. Yes, occasionally he bats second a couple of, I think it was about 15 to 20 games, but the rest of the year he batted in the middle of the lineup. And just go back, you can check, look at the lineups for the games in the 2019 World Series and look where Correa batted. Yes, the Nationals won the World Series, but it wasn't like they won it in 4 games, right? And Carlos Correa's best year, run producing wise, because that was the biggest concern. It wasn't necessarily power for the Mets. The problem was they got so many men on base that they always relied on 2 guys, Lindor and Alonso. And it's not a mistake, and it's not a coincidence that the one year where Carlos Correa was finally put in a position to be an actual run producer on the team, he did well. And this was only a couple of years ago. This wasn't 5 years ago. I wasn't even talking about 2017. I'm going back to 2019. And the Astros finally put him in, if it was 5th or 6th in the lineup, that gives those type of players opportunities with more men on base. When you bat 1st or 2nd, you have a lot less people on base. You don't look for those guys to be your run producers, right? 3, 4, 5, and occasionally 6th in the order are where you want the guys to be driving in those runs at the top of the order. And that was the one year that they finally put him in the middle of the order, and it made all the difference in the world because there is no mistake. The numbers show it. Carlos Correa is one of the clutchest guys in the last 5 to 6 years in the playoffs. 18 home runs. A little under 300 average. This guy's a beast in the postseason. And for anybody who's like, oh, but he only hits 20-something home runs a year. Yes. But if you can put him in the middle of the lineup, I feel very confident. Now, I'm not saying he's going to have 92, 95 RBIs. But if he hits 85 to 90, where else was that in the Mets lineup besides Lindor and Alonso? Nobody was even close. And even Marte, as good as he was batting 2nd. So how many runs he was able to drive in? If Marte was probably deeper in the order, who knows how many more runs or RBIs he would have had if he was pushed back in the lineup. But because the 1, 2, 3, 4 is basically set in this lineup, there is no reason why Correa can't bat 5th and be the run producer that we all know he can be. When you constantly hit 60 to 70 RBIs every time in your career, except one time, and the one time he got moved out of those first 2 spots of the order and moved back into the lineup where there was a more run-producing parts of your lineup, look what he did. When you don't get the opportunity to be a run producer in your lineup because you're batting 1st or 2nd in your lineup, well, you're not going to have 95 RBIs because as good as Marte is and as good as Nimmo is offensively, they're not getting 80 to 90 RBIs if you're batting in those 2 spots. And that's the difference when it comes to Carlos Correa. Again, not saying that you need Carlos Correa and it's going to be horrible if the Mets don't work out this deal with Carlos Correa. That's not the point. The point is, it's not a coincidence that everybody, the Mets were basically 2nd when the Phillies got Turner. All of a sudden, the Mets were, very, very neck and neck 2nd in the division with the Braves, and the Phillies were anointed the number 1 spot in the NL East just based on odds and based on what they did in the offseason. And as soon as the news came out that the Mets landed Correa, or at least agreed with Correa, all of a sudden the Mets are at the top of the list on odds to win the World Series with the Houston Astros. So, there's no way that almost everybody can think that. And it's not saying that, oh, we're getting a 35 home run guy, 105 RBI guy. No, because there wasn't a lot out there, especially in a free agent market, that was going to provide you that type of offense. You want to talk about Adam Duvall? He did it once in his career, and every other year is drastically different. With the 1 year he hits 30 home runs, and then now he did it a little bit recently in 2001, but every other year, 2021, every other year, Peter, there is a source, actually. And, if you listen, I said it. And I posted it on my community page. And I don't say anything that I do not post on my community page, right? I'll read it to you since, Peter's very impatient. Mets owner Steve Cohen. This was the exact quote in the article. There's a lot more into the article that goes a little bit more in depth. If you want to go into it, you can read it yourself. The Mets owner Steve Cohen was understandably upset about the leak that came from the Mets front office. Now remember, there's been a huge drastic change in the leaks from the Mets ever since Steve Cohen took over. So he was clearly upset and has made sure that there's a small circle, including lawyers, working on getting the deal done with Correa. And it's not a bad thing that there's radio silence. And of course, there's lawyers involved. There's contract lawyers. There's probably lawyers that deal with mostly medicals in situations like this. Like, just because this is a high profile, quote unquote, case, does not mean that this doesn't happen more often than not. We just don't hear about it all the time, right? And I talked about JD Martinez and a Scott Boras client where he put language in the deal with the Red Sox in regards to his foot. Pudge Rodriguez, we're going to go a little bit more back, who was also a Boras client at the time, had a spinal issue that was a big concern, and Boras put language into that contract. The term of the contract didn't necessarily change much, but it protected the team when it came to financial. That could have been more of the fact that if, say, Correa goes down with an injury and misses a certain amount of time with that specific injury, in terms of medical and the insurance paying more of that contract over time if they miss a certain amount of games is more key, instead of, with the David Wright situation. That's all we talked about. Well, the Wilpons should be spending a little bit more money because, with David Wright being out so long, the insurance is covering most of that contract, right? The Mets, I think they were on the hook for like 30% of the contract, and insurance was paying 70%. So basically the Mets were basically pocketing the other 70% that they didn't have to pay David Wright from their own pockets. In this situation, who knows? Maybe they're trying to get insurance for 85% of the contract if he goes down with that particular injury. Not saying he blows out his back and that's not part of the language. That's a whole different story. That's a whole nother section. I mean, maybe they are putting that into the language as well. But as we all know, it's all about the ankle, but it could be more. We just don't know. So, with the holidays, with probably fine-tuning, going through it with a fine comb over and over and over again with words and sentences and everything that needs to be put into the contract, it takes time. It takes a lot of people. It takes lawyers on both sides. It takes Boras, who we know is a shark with these things. And also you got a meticulous guy in Steve Cohen, who is also a shark. So you got two sharks going against each other. You got lawyers going over these things, and you got the holidays mixed in. I know we're pissed, but it's not a shock that it's taken as long as it is, and we're in day 8 of this. And, unless we hear something tomorrow on a Friday, I mean, could this go into next week? Look, if I'm the Mets, listen, I'm giving it until Sunday. Like, yeah, at some point you have to give an ultimatum to Carlos Correa. Like, listen, if there's terms agreed upon and like the money and the years are not an issue, and that's not the major concern, and it's still language, at this point it was like, listen, we're already giving you the terms. All right. Yeah, the language is not exactly what both of us want, but at some point, let's go. You have to move on, because you can't wait and basically deal with this nonsense for almost 2 weeks and not have a conclusion. And then if this doesn't work out, you're going to be holding on to what in your hands to get through the whole issue with what do you do now, right? There's still Mancini, there's still Duvall on the table. I don't think it is a downgrade from Correa, but that doesn't mean that Duvall and Mancini couldn't help this lineup, because we were talking about these guys prior to Correa and the Giants deal going on the wayside. So we were talking about those guys. So it's not like we weren't talking about those guys and we were trying to still go after somebody else that was a free agent. And I know people are talking about Devers. And if you notice what the Mets have done this year, they haven't given any of their top prospects this year in any type of trade. They also didn't give up any draft picks because everybody they have signed didn't have a qualifying offer attached. So they keep their draft picks. They added draft picks by giving qualifying offers to their former players that went to new teams, and they didn't make any big trades that was going to basically wipe out 3/4 of their farm system to get a Rafael Devers, even though nobody would be mad at the situation if the Mets get Devers. And you know what? Maybe the Mets will pivot to Rafael Devers if Boston is willing to trade him right now. But what are you willing to give up? Because I'm telling you right now, it's probably going to be your top 2 prospects. Again, not be shocked if it's Beatty. Again, if you get Devers, Beatty is probably expendable at that point, even though you can put him in left field. But if you're getting rid of your third baseman, if you're the Red Sox, Chaim Bloom is probably going to want Beatty. So Beatty, Vientos, Hamel, Mauricio. Honestly, Joel, it probably is going to take Alvarez as well. I know Devers is only a 1-year rental, but in all likelihood, the Mets aren't going to trade all those prospects and not have at least a handshake agreement that Devers is going to work out a long-term deal, similar to what the Francisco Lindor situation was. And basically, the Mets traded all their young shortstop prospects for Francisco Lindor. It probably, if you can give Devers, if you can get Devers for, I don't know, an Alvarez, Beatty, and like a Mauricio, it's 3 of your top 5. I mean, you have to think about it, right? I mean, you do. I mean, you're getting a 26 going to be 27-year-old Devers, who's one of the better players in the game, and you can put him at third base for the next 10 years along with Lindor, what you are already trying to do with Correa. And that's the other reason. The Mets are spending all this money basically trying to avoid making that big trade and wiping out your farm system. Even though I already said this, I still believe Kevin Parada is going to be a better overall player than Francisco Alvarez. I think Francisco Alvarez is going to be a power bat for sure, but we don't necessarily think he might hit for average. We don't know. Could he bat 270 with 35 home runs? Yeah. I mean, that would be ideal. That's what, as the number 1 prospect, I'm expecting that. I mean, you make the number 1 prospect in all of baseball, and you're going to hit 235 and still hit 30 home runs, but you're going to have over 150 strikeouts or close to 200 strikeouts. So at the end of the day, and at some point, the Mets are taking a risk with the Correa contract because of the injury. So are you willing to take the risk with Correa and the contract? Now, I am, because if you sign Correa, that gives you the opportunity of still holding on to all your prospects if you want to. Again, I'm still not a proponent of keeping everybody just to, build up your farm system. You can still build up the lower level of your farm system that is not very good for the Mets. It's mostly the top of their farm system that is pretty decent, but they are middle of the pack in Major League Baseball in their top prospect. Last time I checked, I believe they were 14th in Major League Baseball, and they're probably going to move up a little bit based on the draft they just had. But just think what the Mets did this offseason. The 2 big names was Kevin Parada and Jet Williams. Well, if you're going to draft a catcher and a shortstop, when these 2 guys, Jet Williams and Kevin Parada, seem like they're going to move through the minors rather quickly. Well, these are guys that technically should be behind Alvarez and Mauricio, and they're going to move up the ladder quickly. And Kevin Parada is already a better catcher defensively than Alvarez. He might not hit for that type of power. They're projected him to be about a 20 home run guy, but he's going to hit for average. That's what they're projected. There's no, we don't know if Alvarez can hit for average. Like if he's going to bat 240 and hit 30 home runs, yeah, that's nice for sure. But if you're going to have the strikeouts along with it, that's not going to be exactly what, do we really want 200 strikeouts and 30 home runs? I mean, if that's the type of player you want, well, I don't know. Well, yeah, Mike, he is a couple of years older than Alvarez, but the point is he is better. And there's no guarantee. I mean, it's not like Alvarez hasn't been catching basically all his life. He was always this big, stocky guy that, if he wasn't playing first base, he was catching. And he was drafted as a catcher. So, yeah, you can develop over time, but it's not like he has been in the minors a couple of years now catching. And yes, he has improved, but if the Mets were so confident in Alvarez's ability behind the plate, Omar Narvaez wouldn't have been signed by the Mets. You're not going to be having at the time a guy that's $12 million in McCann, and before you even trade McCann, sign Narvaez to a $7.5 million contract, and not use one of those guys, even though at that now they traded McCann. So you're not giving $7.5 million to Narvaez and sitting him on the bench, because that means Nito is on his way out, and that doesn't make sense for the Mets. And you're not going to have Alvarez as your number one prospect as a catcher and the number one prospect in all of baseball, just DH, because he's not developing as a catcher at that point. Because if you have Nito as your backup, Narvaez as your starting catcher, where is Alvarez going to get catching experience and learn enough and actually play and be a catcher behind the plate and work with a rotation more and get better if he does not catch at the major league level? So all signs are looking at Alvarez is going back to the minors, and at least until half the season, and see how it goes. And if the Mets still need a bat, maybe they will bring up Alvarez in desperation. But the problem is with that, last year we brought Alvarez up in a desperate situation when the offense was disgustingly bad. And then they finally waited, which was too long, to bring up Alvarez. And now it made it seem like we needed him to be the savior of the offense. And it put too much pressure on him. How can you expect that? And it only makes sense with the Narvaez signing, with Nino still around, that Alvarez, unless they believe that they want Alvarez to be the DH, but if you do get Correa, then where is Escobar going? Right? Where is Beatty going? Is Beatty going to go with left field and platooning with Canna? Is Escobar, where is he if you're going to make Alvarez the everyday DH? Because in my opinion, I put Escobar as the everyday DH since he's a switch hitter. And if you want to make that stupid platoon that didn't work out twice when you tried it last year, you have your one player platoon in Escobar who's righty and lefty. And yes, now every now and then, you want to, give Correa a day off. You put Escobar at third base. Maybe you just want to sit Correa, or you can DH Correa, or you want to sit Correa on the bench, use a couple of guys on the bench as your DH as well. There's a lot of ways to go about it. But I already said this once again, and I know Ken just brought up Beatty. I like Beatty a lot. Like I says, if the Mets can somehow get Devers, obviously Beatty is expendable. Maybe. I still think Beatty's going to be a better overall player than Alvarez, and Beatty's our number 2 prospect in all of baseball. I mean, excuse me, in the Mets organization. Excuse me. Well, muted. Escobar actually was a better right-handed hitter last year than left-handed hitter. He was garbage left-handed last year. In September, it didn't matter what side of the plate. He was good. He was actually better. Look at his right-handed splits with his left-handed splits. Well, muted. Escobar's not going to play second base. It's just not going to happen, right? If you get Correa, Escobar should be a DH. I'm telling you, if you have to choose between Escobar, Vogelback, or Ruff, I'm going with Escobar because it's more than likely that Escobar is going to be the better hitter. Gates, I agree with you. Beatty and Canna, I'm fine with. Like, if you want to platoon in that situation, I get it, because you give at bats to one of your better prospects. You want to do that. It's just that Beatty has played left field in the minor leagues. So it's not like he's playing a completely new position just to get his bat in the lineup, right? So he has played left field. Alvarez, in this case, if you're going to develop him as a catcher and you're not going to catch him and just DH him, well, there's no way if you don't catch, you're just not going to get better. Like, it's, you practice to get better. If you're not practicing the position that you're supposed to be practicing. And what annoys me about, the reason why the number one overall prospect in all of baseball in Francisco Alvarez is only because of his bat. Has nothing to do with his defense. And that is alarming to me. This is not a right fielder who is a good defensive right fielder and is blowing it up offensively in the minors. This is a catcher that is clearly not developed yet, because why wouldn't you, right? You see the Orioles brought up Rauschman, who is a really good catcher and is really good offensively as well. Now, there's still concerns. How can the number one prospect in all of baseball still have any concerns coming out of the minor leagues, defensively or offensively? That's the problem that I have with this situation. And not saying that people are wrong, but it's not. I'm telling you right now, I can probably put his defense is probably at a C, maybe a B minus at best right now. Are you going to go with that with a veteran rotation? You can't trust, you're in a win now mode right now, at least right now. And if the Mets aren't going to make big trades and keep their prospects at the moment with the current roster, it's in win now mode. The next year or two are win now mode. Yes, you can trickle in Alvarez and Beatty here and there. Absolutely. And who knows what they're doing with Mauricio. I think they completely screwed up the situation with Mauricio, in my opinion. The way the last couple of years, the moves they made, it basically every chance that Mauricio had of moving to another position has slowly been taken away. And unless you're going to play him in right field at this point, where are you putting him? So it sucks. It sucks, but we're in this spot right now where clearly we see what Steve Cohen's doing. He's spending money so they don't have to give up prospects to get better on their team. They're spending money. And it was the motto that the Dodgers were doing until they got their key guys in trades, the Mookie Betts of the world. Once they got Mookie Betts, you notice they started to bring up the farm system a little bit more, right? Like the reason why the Dodgers are under $200 million at this point in payroll is because a lot of their guys that they brought up over the last 2 years are now ARB eligible, and they're not getting paid this high amount of money at this point. And that is going to work into the favor of the Dodgers next year when they're clearly going to try to go after Ohtani and obviously Devers as well. So they're setting themselves up. But remember what Cohen said. He wants to have a motto like the Dodgers of the East, right? He wanted to be the East Coast Dodgers, basically, right? The way they do things, right? Still bring in high-value talent, but develop your farm system. And the Dodgers really didn't make a big trade until they were able to get Mookie Betts, and they still had enough in their farm system to still develop those guys and still draft well over a 3-year span where they feel comfortable enough with their current veterans and bringing up the youth. And you know what? For all indications are Beatty might be more ready overall than Alvarez. And let's be honest, guys, Beatty and Alvarez would have never been up last year if it wasn't for injuries. Remember, Escobar and Guillermo went down, and it was basically an emergency situation why Brett Beatty came up as third base. It's not like the Mets really wanted him to be up here right at the moment. They had no other choice. They were signing guys off every type of list to fill those spots and fill those roster spots and fill the third base need as well. So Beatty was an emergency option. It wasn't an option because Beatty was just completely lighting up in the minors. They thought, why not give him a chance? And Alvarez was in I felt like was a panic situation when the offense was struggling late into September. So that's where we are on all types of fronts when it comes to moving on with Carlos Correa. If it doesn't work out past this week, I think the Mets just have to get the hell out. As much as I want Correa, you can't let him continue to dictate this whole situation. At some point, you have to pivot. And you know what? If it makes you get Trey Mancini or Adam Duvall, you live with it. It's not like they didn't try to work it out. If Correa is not budging on any front and Boris is not budging on any front when it comes to terms and language of the deal, then move away. The Mets have every right to do so. And yes, it'll be disappointing because it was exciting to hear that news that the Mets and Correa agreed upon, but you're also not going to let him hold all the cards either. At the end of the day, you're giving him this money. You're giving him the contract. You have the right to walk away just like the Giants did. Technically, I don't know if you want to say the Giants did, because the Giants technically didn't. Correa just went to the Mets. So, but you could still walk away and go about your business, because there is things that you still can do at this point that can still make your team pretty damn good, right? We all believe that we could use one more arm in the bullpen. That's why Chafin and Hendriks is up there. We haven't heard anything on the Hendriks front ever since the Correa deal has been agreed upon, and all this nonsense that's been going around with the situation. So the Hendriks deal has been very quiet. You know, we heard about the Vientos McCann until McCann got traded to the Orioles. You know, now we heard prior to the Correa news that the White Sox really like Mauricio. And if that's the case, would you do a Hendriks for Mauricio straight up? I'm kind of 50-50 on that. But again, if you can put Hendriks in that bullpen, now we're talking about a bullpen that could be one of the best in baseball. And again, bullpens are a crapshoot every year. Year by year, a great bullpen can be a decent bullpen and not be the same bullpen, but there's a big possibility that it could be a dominant bullpen. And with an older rotation and a question mark at a few spots in the rotation, right? Even though Senga has great stuff in Japan, he is a question mark. And when you got two late 38 years old, one's going to be 40 soon, in the top of your rotation, you're going to rely on your bullpen specifically early on in the year to protect them innings-wise and to keep them healthy for the end of the year when you really need them and into the playoffs. So that's what you have to look at as well. So would the Mets go after Chafin? That only costs money, right? He's still out there. But, you know, is Chafin, is Hendriks on another level? Yes. But Chafin is no problem at all. Like, we've wanted him since last year, and we wanted him since last offseason. So it's a lot that we can actually look at when it comes to that. And I think the reason why the Mets haven't done nothing else is because they've so been preoccupied on this Correa front for 8 days now. And by the end of the week, it's going to be basically a week. You can't do that. And as much as Steve Cohen basically put his foot in his mouth, basically speaking about the deal with Correa, like this was the missing piece we need, he put his foot in his mouth. As much as I leave Steve Cohen, he's not going to be left without any fault, because I'd be the first one to get on Steve Cohen for this, because he was the one that put his foot in his mouth in the article and the interview that I had with John Heyman, saying that this was the missing piece we need before the deal became official. That's a no-no on the baseball front. You know, there was talks about possible grievance, which, I mean, could be easily proved. I mean, it's in the interview. I don't know if Major League Baseball might go that route because everybody seems to hate Steve Cohen in Major League Baseball. But if this deal gets done, it's a non-factor. But you also still have a little bit more work to do. You know, you still might need a fourth outfielder here. Are you going to use Beatty as your fourth outfielder? Because Cannon could play all positions. He can play right field. He played a little bit of center at times. So he can play all outfield positions. And if you want Beatty to play a little bit more left field, you can do that. But you also can just sign Adam Duvall at your fourth outfielder, and he could be a key guy off the bench late in games. You know, he can give spot starts here and there to give guys days off. You know, he could play right field to give Marte a day off his legs, who's another year older. And he can be your DH if somebody's struggling, such as Escobar. I mean, you can do that, but they have to pivot at some point. And we have to wait and see with that. But it is frustrating because, I mean, everybody assumed, all right, Christmas weekend, we get it. Monday was like observance of the holiday. So like I was talking about, MLB and MLBPA offices were closed on Monday. So any deal that might have happened or could have been happening on Saturday when they were still talking, the deal could have been done and they just couldn't send over the paperwork to the offices for approval until Tuesday. That's why, the quote unquote Correa watch that I did on Tuesday and even on to Wednesday was everybody just assumed that, there was reports that Tuesday was going to be the day that the decision was going to come out. And then it came to Wednesday and now we're Thursday. So I don't know. I honestly don't know anymore. Even this latest article from Mesmerize Online. Like I really like Mesmerize, Jack Ramsey, Michael Myers. I like those guys. I think they're really good reporters. They do a job well. They don't put no crap out there just to get clicks. Reporters do that, yes, but I tend to put them on somewhat of the top of the reporters because I think like a lot of these national guys and specifically Andy Martino love to put stuff out there that is just speculative just for clicks. And these guys, I don't think they necessarily do that. Again, of course they want views on their articles, but they tend to be genuine with this. And these are guys that are Met fans that actually are reporters. So, I don't think they're going to try to, mess around with Mets fans when they are Mets fans themselves. So, even with this article that we just spoke about, right, with Cohen being upset about the leak from the front office, and you know what, even funnier, when you think of the leak in the front office, like who would that be? Billy Epler wouldn't do that, right? Because he's right under Steve Cohen's nose. I don't think he's gonna mess around with that and mess around with his job. Who is still a special advisor on this team that still might be in the know with these talks? Sandy Alderson, right? And not saying Sandy Alderson is the leak, but who is going to be, what is it, a secretary? Is it, an assistant GM or somebody a little bit lower that's in these talks? Is it, I don't know, a lawyer just wants his name out there? I don't know. But Alderson seems like would be the only logical situation here that would be the leak, because I don't trust Alderson at all. I don't. And even though he's not a big part of the day-to-day operations, he is still a special advisor. So he has the key card to probably every office in the building. So that's something that you just have to worry about. And again, I don't think Cohen would just fire Sandy Alderson because, listen, owners and Rob Manfred already hates him. And firing Sandy Alderson will probably, as even a special advisor, might just be the nail on the coffin that the owners and MLB wants to see to really go after him. And somebody brought it up on WFAN. I know a lot of people do listen to WFAN. One of the callers brought up, was saying, if it's true that teams are making it hard to make trades with the Mets because they don't like Steve Cohen, and owners are over the team saying, make it difficult unless the Mets pay a higher price in a trade package, we're going to trade his players to another team. Well, if that's true over the last year, and even at the trade deadline, even though we killed Epler, maybe it was just hard to trade for guys that he actually wanted, and these teams were making it difficult for them. If that's the case, well, the only other route that can't be controlled by owners is the free agent market. And maybe Steve Cohen is spending this money because he has a little birdie in his ear that teams are not going to be willing to trade with him because they don't like him. And the only route that owners can't control is free agency, because agents and players are going to love Steve Cohen because of the fact that he's willing to spend the money. And look, who knows what's real and what's not? But if teams are being difficult to trade with, what is Steve Cohen supposed to do? The only way you can make your team better is develop your farm system and sign players. And when you have an absorbent amount of free agents on your own team, you can only make so many trades to replace those guys. You got to use free agency. I brought up this point many times in the stream. Even if the Mets brought back every single player that was a free agent from their own team and brought them all back, the payroll would have still been easily over $300 million, probably close to around 340, 350, but still, it would have still been this amount. That's why when people go crazy that, oh, look what Steve Cohen did. He went over the 300 mark where, it was hush-hush between the owners of the boys club to not do that. Even though at some point, I can show you that same boys club were making sure that, hey, let's not go over $200 million, but eventually a team did. So every owner is going to get over it at some point, right? Go back and check. The first $200 million team was the New York Yankees, right? They were the first, right? I don't remember outrage about that, right? Because as a Mets fan, why wouldn't you bring that up, right? And too bad. Listen, Cohen's not stupid. He's playing within the rules that these owners specifically set for him in that Steve Cohen tax, right? Because they thought, oh, let's make it 90% tax. He ain't going to spend that type of money. Well, guess what? He is. And now owners can't wait for the next CBA to probably put another luxury tax in there. And Steve Cohen probably wouldn't care about that either. But at that moment, what Steve Cohen is doing, if you build up the farm system and he puts a ton of money into the scouting and into the minor league system, and it works out with the scouting. And look, the Mets had the number 1 draft in all of baseball last year, based on the draft class, the guys that they drafted. So clearly, whatever Steve Cohen's doing in the scouting department and putting the money into the minor leagues and all that stuff, it clearly worked last year. And if that's going to continue, and you're going to be top 5 in draft class in picks based on numerous outlets that rate these draft classes and draft picks that each team makes, if it's going to be as good or a little bit less than that, but it's still building up your farm system in 2-3 years when the Mets extend, when Alonso gets extended and McNeil gets extended, if the Mets do sign Correa and Lindor, your infield's set for at least 10 years, right? Or at least 5 to 10 years, depending on what McNeil gets in a contract. But you have all these guys, that young kids that are coming up, that now you don't have to overly spend to get certain players because you basically have your team. You might need to make one big signing, because even if you do bring in Ohtani and you have Senga, in 2 years, Scherzer and Verlander are gone. So you're going to have to either pray that Matt Allen, Ziegler, or Tidwell in your minor league system perform and become a part of your major league rotation. But if not, you're probably going to have to spend money on pitching. And if that's the only thing you have to spend money on, because your roster is pretty, at least your major league roster is pretty good, and your lineup is basically set, then you're in good shape. And they basically did exactly what the Dodgers did. The Dodgers spent a ton of money. They had the highest payroll for a couple of years in a row. And now their payroll is getting a little lower because the guys that are coming off the books on their team are getting replaced by their guys on their farm system. And it's obviously cheaper because a lot of these guys are in their ARB-eligible years or just about to get to their ARB-eligible years. And it's saving the Dodgers money as well. And I don't think Cohen's going to continue to spend at this crazy amount every single year because there's no need to when there's a pretty good chance that your infield could be set for the next 5 to 10 years. When it's regard with Lindor, even if you not sign Correa and Beatty's your guy, and you got McNeil and Alonso, and depending on if Alvarez is going to be a catcher, your infield set. So you got Nimmo for the next 8 years. Marte in a couple of years is going to be out, but hopefully Alex Ramirez is the next guy that is supposed to be very good offensively. He's getting better and better each year. He was out of the top 10 a couple of years ago, and now he's in the top 5. And he's an outfielder. He's projected to be a corner outfielder, but there's still a possibility he can play center, but he's projected to be a corner outfielder. And that's something that could be a big possibility. So the Mets, if you got a lot of your guys in your lineup that is already set for the next 5 to 10 years, you clearly don't have to spend big money on 3, 4, 5 free agents like the Mets had to do this year because their roster was basically bare because everybody was a free agent. 4/5 of their rotation. almost every reliever that actually mattered in 2022 for the Mets was a free agent. May, Ottavino, Lugo, Diaz. You got to replace them. And then Nimmo, who was your leadoff hitter and your center fielder. So count how many guys. That's around 8 key components of your team last year that were all free agents. So what were the Mets supposed to do? Just bring up all young kids after a 101-win season and say, oh, let's see what happens. You're not going to do that. Especially the excitement that this team has last year. You're going to go with all young guys because you're playing with fire. Because all you need to happen is these young guys not being ready. And you're in trouble. Because you're going to have to survive until the trade deadline. And then you're going to have to give up your prospects anyway. And you're kind of not fixing your farm system because you're going to empty it out to get better because you went with the young guys. And now you're in trouble. Because the young guys that you were hoping for, and what this does, it gives the young guys more time to develop without rushing these guys like Alvarez. You don't have to have Beatty on this team this year. You can throw him back in the minor leagues. Maybe one more year in the minor leagues for Alvarez and Beatty could make all the difference in the world. And in 2024, you bring those guys up, and guess what? They might work out even better. And Alex Ramirez might be ready. You'll have a little bit more understanding of what the hell you're going to do with Mauricio. Because at this moment, Mauricio is either trade bait or you bring his ass up and use his bat. Find a spot for him, right? Might as well. All right. I'm waiting for the comments. Sorry, I was ranting a lot. I know. I apologize. Let's see. I've been looking at it. I see some people say Duvall's trash. They do need way better in that role in Duvall. But again, the options are bare, right? Unless you're going to make a huge trade. And if you're going to make a huge trade, it's not going to be for DH, right? It's going to be for a position player. Let's see. Well, yeah, I think the reason why Duvall is still out there is the fact that, he's had 1 year where he had 30 home runs. Every other year after that, just look at it. He had under 20 home runs. That's a drastic difference of between 10 to 12 home runs difference. Like, that's scary. Like, if you're only looking for a run producing with power, it's not Adam Duvall at all. I'd rather go with Trey Mancini. At least he's a guy who's consistently decent. He's not going to hit you 30 home runs, but he'll hit you 18 to 22 and, provide some good at-bats. And I'd rather go that route because Trey Mancini is not only a guy that you can put in the DH spot, but you can also play him at first. He'll be a backup first baseman. He can play a little bit of corner outfield. In a real crunch, he can play third. So he has a lot of options versatility-wise. That's why Mancini is probably a better option than Duvall. But it depends on what the Mets do. Like I said, if the Mets get Correa and you want Duvall to be a fourth outfielder and, he can provide that one swing power off the bat, yeah, I'm not going to kill the Mets for going after Duvall, and he's not a mainstay in this roster. He's just a fourth outfielder, giving guy days off, coming in late in games for pinch hit purposes, which is not a lot anymore considering you have a DH now. So your bench for pinch hitting purposes, for pinch hitting for pitchers or pinch hitting for lower in your order, the Mets might necessarily have that situation this year, especially if they get Correa because it stretches out your lineup. Your 5th and 6th hitters last year were, pick a name, Cano, Davis, Smith, Vogelback, Ruff, and Canna. And occasionally McNeil, right? Besides McNeil, in the bottom of that lineup, it was trash. From 6 to 9 was absolutely terrible, or at least 7 to 9 was absolutely 100% a zero. So if you can even get 50% more of what you got last year from those 3 spots in a lineup, it's a major improvement in this lineup. That's why when people talk about Correa, they only look at the numbers and doesn't look like what it does to the overall lineup. It pushes everybody back. When your 7th hitter could be Escobar and your sixth hitter can be McNeil, and your fifth hitter can be Correa, and we already know about our top four, well, it stretches out your lineup. It's not going to be easy to go through that lineup when your eighth hitter is Omar Narvaez, or even your eighth hitter is Canna, and your ninth hitter is Narvaez. It's a big difference when Canna was hitting sixth or seventh a lot last year. So, yes. So, Duvall obviously is still an option because he's still out there. All right, let's see what we got in the comments, guys. So I'm only going to be with you for like another 10, 15 minutes because, I mean, what's there to talk about other than what we have been complaining about, right? I mean, there's no news on Correa, so, and we talked about what we needed to talk about, but, all right, let's see. Let's just go through the comments really quick. Well, Steven, exactly. Let me just roll that out there really quick with the comment, right? Yeah, Cohen can spend. That's the difference. He can spend at any moment he wants. But if he doesn't necessarily have to, and this is why I don't understand why owners or people around the league or fans of other teams are pissed off that he's spending, because he had to spend even if he brought back the same players, because the amount of free agents the Mets had. And that's what's so stupid about complaining about Steve Cohen spending, because what was he supposed to do? 101 win team, you're not going to use, all right, we're going to bring up Alvarez and Beatty and Vientos and throw them in a lineup and see what happens. You're not going to do that to a 101 win team that is in win now mode, right? That 3 to 5 year plan is out the window at that point then. Lewis, I think so too, because I mean, at any moment, Correa could just say, Boris, speak to other teams, right? So I do think that the longer the quiet as it is, and as long as it took already, can't be a bad sign. Like that just doesn't make sense, because if anything was going wrong in this negotiation, Boris would back out and get another team. He would have done that already. And Boris has the biggest amount out of all the agents, and he's just, if he has to leak something, he will. And we haven't heard leaks from him or his side. Just tells me that the negotiation is going better than we actually think. Again, it still might not get done for whatever reason, but it's going in I guess approval from both sides, where it's not worth leaking anything out. All right. Trading for Devers is a big mistake. I agree with that, because you can just sign him if you really want him. If you don't get Correa next year, right? If you're going to put Beatty in left field, because Canna is going to be off the books next year after this season. So if you really want Devers, you can get Devers and put Beatty in left field. You know, as I already said, I did the math, not based on arbitration eligible money that could be added to the payroll, but in a quick math of the Mets payroll the next couple of years. Each year, they're getting more and more money off the books. After this season, they're going to get between 90 and 120 million off the books next year, and it's only going to get higher after that. 170, and then in a couple of years, it's 200. So a lot of money's coming off the books in the next 3 years, and that's a big deal, because that gives the Mets options. If your young guys work out, there's no point in buying a free agent in those positions. If Alvarez and Beatty work out, well, no matter where you put Beatty, if you do get Correa, he's your third baseman. If you got Beatty in left field and he works out, and Alvarez works out a catcher, well, those two positions you don't have to worry about. You don't need to worry about spending there. And you can use that, allocate that money elsewhere in areas of need. Let's see. I lost a comment, but I saw somebody said you got to give Correa a deadline. I do agree with that. Jacob, that's a great point. Why not buy championships if you're allowed to? Again, that's not a recipe for success, right? We know that, because prior to the Yankee, post Yankee dynasty, they spent more money than almost everybody, and it got them one championship in the last 13 years, right? If you really want to talk about it, in the last 21 years, they have one championship. Right? So spending hasn't worked for the most part. The 1 year where they actually spent the right way, in 2008 offseason, going into 2009, they won the World Series. But the years when they brought in the Giambis of the world and the Clemens of the world, like those type of pitchers and those type of players really didn't necessarily work out. Were they making the playoffs every year? Yeah, because they were a good team, but they didn't get over that hump again. And the years that the dynasty of the Yankees was, yes, what the trades that happened with the O'Neills, the Martinez, the Brocious, the David Justices of the world. Those were trades. They weren't homegrown, but they had the core four, and they put veteran players that were the missing pieces to that young core, right? So it wasn't necessarily they bought those guys at all, really. So that's something that, people tend to not want to bring up, especially Met fans, that, that it was just about the Yankees spending money when they were buying championships. Wasn't true. 2009, yes. But look what, in the Yankees world, it's World Series or bust, right? In 2008, they had the same fate as the Mets of not making the playoffs, closing the old Yankee Stadium. Going into the 2009 season and that offseason, they had to do something. And they knew exactly what they needed, and they got the guys. They got their first baseman, and they got their two arms in the bullpen in Burnett and Sabathia. It made all the difference in the world, and they won the World Series. Again, there was other players on that team. The last part of the last hurrah for the core four was their last world championship, right? But they added what they needed. They spent, what was it, almost $400 million that offseason? If I'm not mistaken, maybe around $350 to get those guys. So, yes, you could say, quote unquote, they bought that championship, but who cares? If it's within the rules and nobody's breaking the rules, who the hell cares? I'm sorry. I never fault the owner for spending their money. And listen, when you got a $49 million payroll, as the Oakland A's do, and your owner is $2.5 billion net worth, that's a joke. I'm sorry. You can easily have $120 million payroll and actually be competitive. That's embarrassing. All right. You're not crying poor here. All right. It's not like you're not bringing in money. You automatically every year get $100 million from TV revenue sharing. Every team gets $100 million. And that's probably not including the streaming services that have been a big part of it with Amazon and Apple and God knows what else in the next couple of years. So they're already getting $100 million. That's right off the bat. That's not including ticket sales, food sales, jersey sales, all the other stuff that is part of adding money to the teams. And that is shared between everybody. Everybody gets $100 million. So even if you put half that and you pocket the rest, if the Oakland A's would put $50 million more into their payroll, it would be $100 million. Not saying that they would be testing the Astros, but all you need is a year like a team like what happens if those few signings you make that you could actually, get two $25 million players that are pretty damn good could lift up the lineup, and you don't know the young players that can perform. And then and then all of a sudden they come out of nowhere, and now you're a contender for at least a year or two, maybe longer. But I don't know. It's crazy to me how some owners think. Hector says, Rob, I didn't hear complaining when George. Well, there was complaining, but it's not the complaining that you hear right now. It wasn't that as bad as it is now. I mean, listen, there was Met fans talking about the Yankees. I mean, we had to deal with that as Met fans in our own city. Oh, look what the Yankees are doing, and look at the Wilpons basically pocketing every dollar they can. If it wasn't for the Madoff money, who knows if the Wilpons would have ever spent the money. Did the Mets spend money in 2005 to 2006? Yes. But was that the Wilpons money, or was the money that Wilpons were getting when Madoff was stealing money and the Wilpons were getting kickbacks from that? Because remember, once the Madoff scandal happened and that money dried up for the Wilpons never took money out of their own pockets to better their team. For ever. And the only signing they made within that period was Yoenis Cespedes, but they basically had no choice at that point because they got so much pressure from every parts of the country, from Met fans to reporters everywhere. And that was the only big signing they really made. And that's a joke. Rocky, it's not like teams don't know about it. All they have to do is, I mean, the majority of the teams knew he had an issue with his ankle. They were throwing at him the last couple of years because of the cheating scandal. And listen, you want to keep hitting out batters? Hit them. Put them on base. Because if you got more run producers in your lineup, well, guess what? Those runs are going to be driven home. D. Garcia, there's no point in trading for Ohtani. None whatsoever. Especially if you get Carlos Correa. Even if you don't get Carlos Correa and you get a Mancini in this lineup, we're not going to be at the point where we're so desperate for offense. I mean, if we are, there'll be somebody else available that's a lot cheaper that you can probably get at the deadline. There's no really point of getting Ohtani where you can just sign him at the end of the year. Let's see. I'm just looking at the comments, guys. Well, yeah, Jason, absolutely. Like, I mean, listen, it really depends though, because it does give the Mets options. If the Correa deal does not work out, and your third baseman could be Beatty, who knows? But if the Mets aren't signing Correa and, basically throwing Beatty to the wolves, right? They know Beatty can play left field. He's done it in the minors. So they didn't do what they did with Mauricio with Lindor, right? They never moved Mauricio to another position. He continued to play shortstop in the minors when it made no sense, because you have Vientos and Beatty, who was your third baseman in the minors, as your top prospects. So you weren't moving Mauricio over to third because he would have been third in line or second in line. And then when you signed Lindor, Mauricio should have been off shortstop in the minor leagues that day. If you wanted to put him in the outfield to learn, do it. The Mets didn't want to hurt his value. That's the whole reason why they didn't move him. And if you think that's not true, look what they did in the Dominican Winter League. They put him at second and third, and then look what happened. Now they're going to sign Correa. So what the hell are you going to do with Mauricio? Right? So if Beatty is a guy that can play left field, and the Mets they'll probably go all in for Ohtani, but you know what? A consolation prize could be Devers if the fact that you can move Beatty to left field. And if you were so concerned about moving Correa from shortstop to third base, wouldn't you want to go after a Devers if the possibility calls for it? If you don't get Correa, Beatty can go to left field. I'd rather have a 2 years younger player in Devers, who is a third baseman, put in this lineup. If you don't sign Correa, you can put Beatty to left field, which you're going to do anyway if you sign Correa. Steve, I don't know what core you're talking about. The Yankees don't have a core. Aaron Judge, that's the core. Their core was 2017. When you had Torres, when you had Sanchez, when your core's gone. There's no core. Like, unless Volpe and Peraza become big parts of this team, which maybe Peraza is most likely going to be on this team besides Volpe at this moment. But it depends. If the Yankees trade for Brian Reynolds, well, there goes the farm system, because you're going to give a lot. So, yeah. I just, there is no core. Like, who's your core for the Yankees? I mean, Rizzo ain't a core. Rizzo's getting up there in age, Judge is going to be the last remaining guy from the baby Bombers, because I think Torres is going to be gone, because they're going to need a spot for LeMahieu. So who's your young guy? Gonzalez is a nice player, but he's a utility guy. He's not somebody you could start every day and think he's going to be good. Stanton's up there in age. You already know you can stamp Stanton for missing 40 games a year, because he always does, right? Besides Judge, what do the Yankees really have? Their rotation is really damn good, but other than that, there isn't really a core. And the guys that you're relying on are the same guys you relied on last year. And last year, almost every one of them played well above the back of their baseball card. And then when they actually played to the back of their baseball card, they had a second half like last year. If it wasn't for Judge having a historic year, who knows where the Yankees would have been? If Judge would have hit his normal 40 to 45 home runs with 90 to 110 RBIs and maybe knock 10 points off his average, the Yankees aren't even close to the same team that they were. If you're getting Brian Reynolds, it's going to make you better. But, like I said, the American League is a lot weaker than the National League. The Yankees don't have to do much to probably win the NL East because there's not a lot of competition. The Blue Jays are good, but it seems like the Blue Jays choke every single year. Can they be better? Yeah. I mean, you just think that the younger players are going to get better. All the kids that they brought up over the last couple of years, they're going to be better. The Toronto rotation is pretty damn good. I don't think it's at the Yankee level, but it's pretty damn good. So, it's not going to be easy to win that division with the Blue Jays. But the American League, if you look at it, look where all the signings happen. All the big signings have been in the National League. Has not been in the American League at all. Like, everybody thought the Orioles were going to be big spenders. What happened? Right? They were supposed to get all this pitching. What did they get? Right? So the Orioles are basically bringing back the same team. Young, and they got one of the best farm system in all of baseball, but that's no guarantee. Right? So, I just don't know. Is Seattle going to be better? I don't know. They're not better than Houston. So that's kind of off the table there. Is Seattle better than the Yankees? No. The Central is a joke in the American League. And the Yankees barely beat the Guardians. So I don't know. The gauntlet is the National League. Really. The Astros are basically better than everybody. They clearly proved it. But other than that, in the American League, every American League team can be beat handily. I don't think the Giants are in on Correa, to be honest. I think they're probably pissed off that Boris and Correa just backed out without even having any type of conversation with them. I didn't think Correa wanted to be a Giant. They just paid him an exorbitant amount of money. And then when the Giants kind of had second thoughts, Correa was like, F you, I'm going to the Mets. I think if it was any other team that came in late, if it wasn't the Yankees or the Mets, and it was like the Twins, I don't think Correa would have ever backed out of the deal. I think he would have probably still been negotiating with the Giants. And the deal might have got done at some point with the Giants. But because it was the Mets and he wanted to play with Lindor, I think it happened quick because of that. Let's see. Still can't believe the Yankees showed the 0-4 Sox beating them to try to hype them. Yeah. That was an odd one. I don't understand that one. I mean, if you're a Yankee, how did that hype you up? That made you more depressed. That made you want to go out there and lose. Oh, yeah? Oh, thanks. I don't understand. Well, yeah, the Padres are definitely... Look, if every California team taking away the Angels and the A's, every California team should be going after Ohtani hard. Because if he really wants to be in California, well, it's not rocket science to think that he'll pick a California team. So the Giants, the Padres, and the Dodgers should all be going hard after him. But if he doesn't have if he doesn't necessarily want to stay in California and it doesn't matter where he goes, just pay me the most money, well, now you're going to be looking at the New York teams, right? And all indications are the Mets aren't going to get outbid. And again, that can be a false narrative if a team actually does outbid them, because it is possible. But if Ohtani, all indications are the Mets are going to go hard after Ohtani, really hard. I still believe that the Dodgers are probably going to get Devers. I think that's probably a perfect spot for him. And I think the Giants are going to be holding the bed, because you got to look at it this way. What has Ohtani talked about, right? He was disappointed after this year that the Angels haven't made the playoffs. And he hates losing. So why would you go to a team like the Giants that lost out on every free agent they possibly can get, right? And you bring Ohtani on that team, how much better are they going to be? Not much. You're going to be basically the Angels of the National League, right? You're not better than the Dodgers. You're not better than the Padres. So you're going to be sitting third in the National League West anyway. So if he really wants to win and still get paid, who are you going to look at? The Mets, the Yankees, the Dodgers, and the Padres. And I think it's probably going to come down to those 4 teams. Oh, yeah, Frank, absolutely. Look, the Mets currently put together now without Correa is a playoff team. Like, even if you're the last wildcard team, there's a pretty good chance that the Mets are going to be at the very worst a last wildcard team. It'd be disappointing, but what the hell does that matter when the Phillies were the last wildcard team and I mean, they made the World Series. So, it does come down to the fact that if you can get better, why stop? Right? Look, Cohen didn't, when Turner went to the Phillies, that made Cohen look at like, wait a second. So it's okay for the Phillies to sign everybody and their mother and spend $500 million over the last 2 years on players. And you see the Padres buying everybody. And the Rangers, who actually spent $500 million last year on 2 players and we got 67 wins out of it, but it's not okay for the Mets to sign players, is absolutely ridiculous. Look what the Phillies brought in over the last, 3 to 4 years. Harper, Realmuto, Schwarber, Castellanos, and now Turner. But nobody talks about them. And the Padres did the same exact thing. Bringing in Machado, trading for Soto, bringing in Dan the Bogarts, spending on this guy, spending on that guy. But nobody talks about that. Like, it's crazy to me. Like, you can't allow the team in your division to get better and you not try to get better yourself. You're not helping the situation. At this point, you can probably say that the Mets had a better offseason in the NL East than the Phillies because they made more moves and they're probably overall better on paper, which means nothing. But let's be honest, the Braves, even though they signed a lot of their young guys, they did lose Freeman and Swanson in back-to-back years. So for all the Braves fans that want to say, oh, we're still good, yeah, of course you are. But you are losing 2 guys that help you win the 2021 World Series. That's not something to just blow over. And then it looks like you're replacing Swanson with a rookie that, yeah, might be good, but also could not be good. And you are the same team that strikes out a ton. And the majority of the games that you won is when you actually hit the home runs. And when you didn't hit a home run, you faced good pitching and teams that were over 500, you struggled. Anybody can end up third place in the NL East. No doubt about it. Because these teams are that good that anybody, you could have 98 wins and be in third place in the NL East. That means you had a bad season? No. It's just that there's a gauntlet in the NL East. Like, it's probably the best division in baseball by far. All right, guys, so I'm just going to go to the comments one more time before I end the stream. And then hopefully we get some type of damn news about Correa, hopefully tomorrow. I have not been to Oakland Stadium, and I'm glad I didn't go with the 7-line army because it's trash there, even though it's always fun to go with the 7-line army. And I know somebody talked about earlier, I forgot who it was, I apologize, that talked about going to Miami with the 7-line. I am doing that, and I'm also going to spring training at the end of February with the 7-line. So I'll be in Florida twice in a month, the end of February and the end of March for opening day. So in Miami. So it's going to be, I think there's 2,000 tickets, or 2,000 Mets fans from just the 7-line army alone. It's going to be Citi Field South down there with 2,000 tickets sold for the 7-line army, and all the other Met fans that are just going as Met fans, not with the 7-line army. It's going to be Citi Field South. Like, it's going to be probably, I mean, Could you expect 20+ thousand Met fans there? Probably. Like, that's how many people are going to be there. Like, it's going to be Citi Field South, and it's going to be fun there for sure. So I'm just going to run through it really quick. Yeah. All right, let's see. Yeah, Benji, that's a good point. Let's bring that up before we call it quits. Yeah, Trout, there was reports saying, again, take it for what it's worth, if it's true or not, that Trout, since the Angels are just, I don't know what the hell they're doing. When you have the two best players, or at least two out of the three best players in all of baseball, and you can't make the playoffs, and you keep on screwing up the roster, and Trout is getting older and older and older, according to the reports, he wants to come home. Now, he has a no-trade clause, and the teams that are rumored about are either of the New York teams or Philly. So, I mean, obviously you have to trade for him, and you got to take on that huge contract, but he also has back issues. I mean, if he's healthy, he can still be one of the best players in the game. And obviously, Trout will make any team better. But if those rumors are true, whoever loses out on the Ohtani endeavors might go after Trout. And that would be very interesting. Well, Brian, you can't necessarily say that. But again, in those 5 to 6 years, if it brings you a championship, why do you care? And I'm sick and tired of people talking about this. Like, at some point, you have to take a risk. You haven't won since 1986. At some point, you got to win. Because all this spending of money, and no matter what young guys you bring up, if you don't win a World Series, all of this is a waste of time and pointless. The whole point is to win a World Series. It's not to get a consolation prize to make the playoffs. Are you going to be happy that the Mets, for the first time in their history, make the playoffs 3 years in a row? That's what you're going to be happy about? You know what that's called? Oh, the Wilpon syndrome. Stop it. Because in 5 to 6 years, did you see what? In 2 years, James McCann and Robinson Cano, that total contracts are around $60 million. Cohen DFA'd one of them. He's paying them to be off the Mets. So money is not an option. And in 5 to 6 years, you're going to have a 34-year-old Lindor and Correa. No, it's not necessarily they're going to be bad players at all. And especially if Beatty and Alvarez turn out with Alonso still in the prime and McNeil still in his prime, you still got veteran guys. Have you seen how many players at 33, 34 years old are still very good players? Now, they might not be at the level that you want them to be, but they're still going to be good players. If you're going to, and Robinson Cano was a product of steroids. He broke down because of steroids. It's a big difference. And again, if you're not going to be willing to take chances, then you're a fan that would rather, Brian, I don't know you, but I can assure you there's a lot of Met fans like this. Met fans, it's either World Series or complain that they're a bad team. You can't have it both ways. It doesn't make sense. You got to take risk. You don't think teams that win championships takes risk? You don't think the Padres are taking a risk? You don't think the Phillies are taking a risk? Of course they are. They've been putting Nick Castellanos or Kyle Schwarber in the outfield who can't play defense. That's a risk. You're risking your defense for offense. Right? You have to take risk. If you're not going to take risk, then guess what? You're probably not going to win. Because no matter how good your farm system is, it took a team like the Braves to get Eddie Rosario and Jorge Soler, and look who was the big stars of that World Series. It was Eddie Rosario and Jorge Soler won the MVP. It wasn't their core guys. It wasn't their players that they brought up. They were a part of it, yes. But if it wasn't for Soler and Rosario, who knows if the Braves would have won that World Series? Because they were dead in the water after Acuna got hurt. And then they brought in Duvall, Rosario, and Soler, and it changed everything. Because the core, the young guys that they had, and the veterans that they had in Freeman and Swanson at the time, weren't helping his team at all after Acuna got hurt. It took them to make 3 trades to revamp their whole outfield in Duvall, Rosario, and Soler, and it changed everything for the Braves. So there is no scientific way of putting a team together. You just do what you can to put the best team on the field and hope for the best. And you can't, and until you realize that you have to take risk to win. And you already see that when it came to James McCann and Robinson Cano, and their contracts total around $60 million in total, Cohen is basically paying them to be off that team. So in 5 to 6 years, you're going to have 34-year-old Lindor and Correa that is in the middle of their contracts. It's not that bad. If you get 5 or 6 to 7 really good years of what you expect from Correa and Lindor, you expect those back end of the years of the contract to be bad. That's just what you're going into. Turner's going to be bad. Harper's going to be bad. Machado is going to get a bigger contract after he opts out. Bogarts is going to be bad. All these contracts. When Soto signs a 13-year deal and Ohtani signs a 10-year deal, all those Devers 10 years deal, they're all going to be bad contracts at the end of it. But you're not going to not get them to not make your team better now over the next 3 to 5 years because you're worried about the back end. If that's the case, then no team should ever give up a long-term contract. But guess what? You're never going to get a player in free agency if you don't give long-term contracts. So you're going to be stuck with your thumb in your ass, basically. All right. So let me just run through it real quick, and then we'll call it. Brian, nobody. No. There will never be a cap floor because the MLB PA will never approve a cap ceiling. So that's why there'll never be a cap in Major League Baseball. The MLB PA's union is too strong, and the owners, most of them, don't want a salary floor. So you're never going to get a salary cap. All right. All right. Let's see, guys. Hey, listen, sleep would be nice. I tell you that. I don't get a lot of it. Nah, you know what? Listen, I mean, I know Red Sox fans will complain, Tilly. Listen, I understand that, but you did finally get your championships, and you got your 3 championships, 4 championships. You're fine. You can deal with a little bit of nonsense with your team right now, even though no fan should ever be complacent with your team. You know, Met fans are going to be in euphoria if the Mets win a World Series, but you can't just necessarily say the hell with the next 10 years because they won a World Series. Yeah, it will calm down the nonsense that Met fans talk about every year about disasters that happen and not winning the World Series. But at some point, you have not won it since '86. That has to be a priority. Like, you can't keep on talking about, you can't complain that the Wilpons didn't spend and now complain that Cohen's spending. And when you can't have it both ways. Yes, you want a mix of free agents, veteran guys, and young guys, of course. I mean, there's not a lot of teams that just have all veteran guys and win a World Series. You need young guys and veteran guys. The Mets are working towards that. They are. And you have to, at some point, make winning a World Series a priority and not just, oh, guess what? Are Met fans going to be happy that you made the playoffs 3 times in a row, the first time in your history? No. That shouldn't be an end goal. The end goal is to win a championship. And if you're not if you're not a fan that wants to win a championship, and you're going to talk about complaining about, oh, they don't need Correa, they don't, in 5 to 6 years, those contracts going to be a bust. Well, probably, but you have to take that risk because if you don't, then you're probably not going to win. Again, that whole comment that Brian made is, look, it's your opinion. That's fine. And we can agree to disagree. But it's not like the Braves won because of their young core. They brought in trades with veteran guys that changed everything in that 2021 outlook. It wasn't Freeman putting over the top, but Swanson or Darno. Soler was the MVP of the World Series. And then he was off the team the following year. And Rosario wasn't as good this year as he was in 2021. Duvall either. Duvall hit 30 home runs. I think he hit about 20 of them with the Braves. Or 15 of them with the Braves. None of those guys had a season like they had once they got traded to the Braves after that. So the Braves took a risk. They were in save the season mode by revamping the outfield with those trades. It worked out. It could have turned out really bad for them. And who knows who would have won the World Series. But you have to take risk. Not saying that you have to take stupid risk, but Correa is not a stupid risk. Right? What has Cohen told you? 3 to 5 years. That's his window, right? Win a World Series in 5 years. You're going into year 3. So there's still a 3-year window here with the guys that you currently have. And you don't sign late 30-year-olds to the top of your rotation and think you're not in win now mode. You are. But it's not like in 2 years, Correa is going to be a complete disaster, or Lindor. Because if that's the case, and if you're worried about 5 to 6 years with Correa and Lindor, why aren't you worrying about 5 to 6 years with Alonso and McNeil, who are going to be up there in age too? Well, then you might as well not sign McNeil and Alonso and trade them. Because you're not really looking to win. You're looking too far down the road at that point. 5 years is irrelevant for the next 3 years. And you're in a window of what Cohen wants to win a World Series. You're going into year 3. I don't care about 7, 8, and 9 until we get to year 7, 8, and 9 of those contracts. Because I can assure you, the Judge contract's going to be bad, the Turner, the Bogarts, all those big contracts are going to be bad. The Ohtani contract at the end of it, the Soto contract at the end of it, all of it. The Devers contract at the end of it. You're not giving these big long-term contracts to these players, expecting them to be the same player they are at 30 when they're 39. If you expect that, you're not really understanding the game of baseball at all and the age process in sports. All right, guys, so I'm going to end this stream in a few seconds. Hopefully we get some good news with Correa soon. And if not, pivot and do something else. Because I think it's time for the Mets to make a decision and put a time limit on this. If I'm Cohen, I'm going to go, listen, Boris, look, we negotiated for 8 days now. It's either going to work or it's going to not. I can't handcuff my team into doing other things because you are stubborn into what you want to do. If that's the case, find a similar contract from another team and we ain't coming back to the table. Make it Sunday. Sunday's the last day. We don't have a deal. We're going to do something else. Husky, you don't know he wasn't on steroids his whole career. We don't know that. He got caught twice. You think that all of a sudden he just stopped? A lot of people believe that A-Rod was on steroids for the majority of his career. You remember, they didn't start testing until like 10 years ago. You know what I'm saying? All right, guys. So I'm just going to look. Yep, Ken, I like ranting. It's fun. Because there is a lot of the same questions. Everybody's asking a lot of the same questions. I see Duvall a lot. I see Correa a lot. I see a little bit about Mancini. People are talking about Devers and Beatty. It's a lot of the same stuff that I'm ranting about. It's not like I'm going off the books here. Richard, yes, I think Correa will be a Met. I think it's annoyingly frustrating how long it's taken, but I think he will. Webbs, if you don't think average doesn't matter, then how did the Mets win 100 games last year? 101. Because they didn't hit a lot of home runs. And Webbs, he hit 30 home runs once in his career. Every other year in his career, he's hit under 20. So he is not a guy who hits bombs. He hit it 1 year. And he's not a very good defensive outfielder. He's okay. Let's not give him that credit. He should have been signed if he's that good. Brian, I think you've had my back. Well, yeah, the Braves have also, before I want to get up to as many questions as I can. Yeah, Brian, they have locked up young guys, but again, that's not all necessarily. Again, It's not like the Braves won because of just their young guys, right? They're young. They had all those young guys last year. What happened? And you know who they did lose? Freeman. You don't think that was a big thing? And now they lost Swanson. Two key components of their 2021 World Series, right? So it's not all just because they locked up their young guys necessarily they're going to win every year. Because where's the proof? Because it's not true. If you don't supplement those young players with a couple of veteran guys, pretty good chance you're not winning. Because there hasn't been back-to-back winners since the Yankees. And that was, 20 plus years ago? So, there's no scientific way of putting a team together. Not saying you're not going to be competitive every year. Clearly, the Braves are. But that doesn't guarantee you a World Series. So, no matter if the Mets spend money to win and the Braves just lock up their young players, well, clearly both work last year, right? I mean, we both had the same record. So you can't say one side better than the other when it took trades for the Braves to do in 2021 to make all the difference in the world to round out their team. And it's not like the Mets don't have a young core, right? The Yankees, you always talked about the core four, right? Well, the Mets have Nimmo, Alonso, and McNeil. It's only one player less. So it's not like it's like core one. It's core three. So they do have young talent. And the possibility of Alvarez and Beatty, which might be a core 4 or core 5. And now we're talking. All right, guys. So we're going to look one more time. Brian, I didn't say you didn't understand baseball. I don't care if you played. I played baseball. What does that mean? I played D1 baseball too. But that doesn't matter when it comes to the fact that you are making it seem like Correa and Lindor in 5 to 6 years matter over the next 2 to 3 years, because it doesn't. You can't guarantee just as much as I can't guarantee they're not going to still be good players. But you're already assuming that they're going to be a bad contract, which every contract that is long is going to be bad. But if you can win in the next 3 years or 2 to 3 years, it's going to change your mindset. Yeah, we're going to complain about it 5, 6 years from now, but you do have a championship, and it's not like young players are not coming up at the system. That's all I was saying, Brian. So playing baseball and actually have common sense about who cares about a long-term deal when every team does it that is actually trying to win? Because every team's going to be bitching and moaning about the last years of those contracts, buddy. New York Rangers go. Okay, 2016 was how many years ago? So we're going to go back to 7 years ago when he came up in the league. Come on. And then what about, you didn't bring up 18, 19, and 22. Those don't count? Those are earlier than those years, 2016, 2017. I don't care what Lindor did 6 years ago. Doesn't matter. I care what he did the last couple of years. And that goes for every player. I don't care what you did 6 years ago, because it's irrelevant. You're probably not the same player 6 years ago than you are now. And Duvall is not. But he's not the best available player, because he's not. If he is, why is he almost the last guy off the books? Why wouldn't the team, if he's so good, or at least good enough to be an everyday player, which he's not? Because the Mets aren't getting him to play every day. He would be a fourth outfielder on the Mets. I agree, Brian. That was stupid. But you know what? When Buck came into the picture, Lindor hasn't been a moron. And that was his first year. And listen, that shouldn't have happened, but that doesn't mean that McNeil wasn't at fault either. Right? They both didn't like each other. And Luis Ross was a big part of it. Trust me. I mean, there was no leader on that team. And now that's an embarrassment. And for McNeil, that was an embarrassment for Lindor. But the next year, Lindor had, 26 home runs and 107 RBIs? Okay. If you want to hit go back. But if you're going to go back to 2016, 2017, then I can use that with Lindor and Correa, and then there's no argument, right? Go back to the last 3 years. What has he done? 2021, he hit 30 home runs. Where was he last year? Yeah, I agree. But Webbs, exactly. But look at the lineups that Duvall was in compared to Lindor, right? It was Alonso and nobody else, right? The Mets struggled to score in 2021. Until they brought Baez, then there was nobody in that lineup. There was a lot more protection for Duvall than there was for Lindor. Webbs, you can call me stupid all you want, but it's not misinformation. You're making out Duvall to be a great player, and he's one of the last free agents out there. If he's so good, why hasn't look? Why don't the Yankees take him? Don't they need a left fielder? Duvall would be perfect for them, right? David, I don't know. You're a Yankees fan, so I mean, come on. Brody. Oof. But I'm not saying he's garbage, but there's a reason why he is one of the last free agent outfielders out there. If he's good enough, oh God, kind of Fleffer, congratulations about that. And again, if you're gonna bring up 2016 and 2017 for a player, then bring it up for every other team. If you're not gonna do that, then it's pointless conversation, right? Because I can bring up Lindor's 2016, 2017. I can bring up Carlos Correa's 2017. Isn't that the point? I mean, why can't we just do that with everybody, right? I want to bring up Torres's 2019. Does that matter now? I think Duvall is a hit or miss. Is he a good player? But again, if you're gonna put Duvall on this Mets team, he's not playing every day. He's not playing every day. I don't lose credibility because you're bringing up 2016, 2017. Why do you care so much about that? I brought up 2021. But if you're going to bring up 2016 and 2017, 5 years later, then bring it up for Lindor and Correa. You just talked about Correa. Then, where Brian would brought up 5 to 6 years from now. Well, why are we worried about 5 to 6 years prior or in the future? And you know what? Darren Ruff is not Duvall. I can guarantee Duvall is better than Ruff. But who cares? The point is he going to be a mainstay in this lineup? Because I can guarantee you Duvall's not playing over Canna, which I probably disagree with because I think obviously Duvall has more power, but that doesn't necessarily look. We were talking about fourth outfielders and DH spots for Duvall. But Davey, you're missing the point as well. Was I wrong on 2016, 2017 with the home runs? Yes. But you're going back 6-7 years. Who cares? Well, look, average 46. But again, let's knock 7-8 home runs off the total because he was in a bandbox. But again, yes. Well, Schwarber, look, it hurt the Phillies during the season. Average was up terrible, but they also strike out a ton. Would I take 46 home run in this lineup? Hell yeah. Because you know what? The Mets actually got on base a lot more than the Phillies did. So them 46 home runs would have went a lot longer in the Mets lineup. Okay, David, and I admit that. But you're bringing up 7 years ago, 6-7 years ago, which is very irrelevant. You want to talk about 2021? Fine. What happened in 2019? Right? That was the juice ball. Where was Duvall? What about last year? Is he a bad player? No. But so you would rather have Duvall on his team than Correa? I'm just curious because if that's the case, Duvall is going to be playing a lot less than Correa. Again, Duvall can probably hit the same amount of home runs as Correa. Webbs, I agree with you. I think it's a disaster to sign any player for more than 7 years. But the market is showing that everybody's getting that crazy contract. And again, you're not going to get anybody, especially a position player. Oh, David, I agree with you. If you give me Duvall and Correa, we're talking. Now we're on the same page. Tilly, I'm not sensitive. I'm trying to ask questions. But don't bring up 6 years ago and act like that's the point. Because I can bring up every player that was better 6 years ago than they are now. I agree, Webbs. I would give $35 million a year for a 6-year contract. But I don't know if Correa is going to do that, and that's what sucks. And unfortunately, right now, almost every position player that is worth noting, a top free agent, got a tremendous amount of years, which is so stupid. Look, I think we all can agree that anything over 7, I would even push it to 8 years maybe, is so stupid. Because, I mean, we're going to be laughing at these contracts for every team, including ours, about these, you know, when Judge can barely get around the bases at 37 years old, and, you know, Correa, who can barely walk at that point, and Lindor, it would probably be DH at that point. Like, it's crazy to me. Like, it's sad that we're going to have to deal with back end of the contracts, and we're going to be miserable because of it. But if your team spends and makes good decisions in the scouting department and the farm system, maybe it won't hurt as much. But you know what? I already said this. I think the Mets should pull out if they can't restructure the deal, in my opinion. Like, I mean, you saw the polls. In my opinion, I think it should be 7 to 9 years. I'm pushing it on 9 years. But 7 to 9 years and whatever amount of money you want. Because the money's irrelevant. It's the year. And if they don't do that, if the Mets do 10 or more years, am I going to like Correa in the first 3 to 4 years? Yeah, of course. I'll be happy with that part. But I know it's going to be a disaster. Him and Lindor will be going on the field with a wheelchair, like, and crutches. Like, it's going to be that bad. But, you know, was the excitement real? I'm not going to tell you I wasn't excited. Hell yeah, I was when I heard the Mets agreed with a deal with Correa. Because, you know, in our Mets fandom, we don't get that every so often at all, especially with the Wilpons. You know, I mean, some Met fans might have had a heart attack when we signed Beltran. You know what I'm saying? Like, that was that crazy. You know, that's a good question, Webbs. You know, if Scherzer, I think it's hard. I don't think Scherzer is going to opt out, to be honest with you. Because even if he has a really good year, is somebody really going to pay him $45 million or 43, as you said, to pitch for another year? Because nobody's going to give him a multi-year deal. Wouldn't he opt out to get a 2-year deal or 3-year deal again? I don't think he's going to opt out because I don't think he's going to get more money, to be honest with you. But, I mean, I think if Scherzer stays or doesn't, the Mets are going after Ohtani no matter what. Well, Evo, the reason why I want Correa, because what was the concern last year in the playoffs? The Mets had nobody to turn to if it wasn't Lindor and Alonso picking up the slack in this lineup. Correa has a proven track record in the postseason. Isn't that the guy you want in the postseason up? Because there ain't nobody in the Mets lineup that I trust in this lineup to come up in a big spot in the postseason. And if you're going to go with that lineup, I think that's concerning, because isn't the idea is to make the playoffs and have somebody that can actually perform in the playoffs? Now, the experience can help Alonso, Nimmo, McNeil. Absolutely. But are you going to take that money to the bank? Are you going to put all your money down on it? That's going to be the case? Because I'm not going to trust that. Could it work out? Yeah. But I'd rather have a known commodity that is actually productive and a proven person in the postseason. And I think it would make so much of a difference in the postseason. Like, I think the Mets with this roster currently construction can still win 97 to 100 games without Correa. But it's not about just winning those amount of games and making the playoffs. It's about what you do in the playoffs. And if you don't have those guys that come up clutch, then what's the point? Right? Because do I just want to make the playoffs every year and be happy about that? Or do I want to win? Because if you're happy about just making the playoffs, then the conversation's over for everybody. Because the point of winning, of going to doing what you have to do and getting the players that you know that can perform. That's why when people talk about Beatty and Alvarez, yeah, they might be good during the season, but what happens when they get to the postseason? They might be, Jeter isn't a Hall of Famer because what he did during the season. He never won an MVP. You know why he's in the Hall of Fame? Because what he did in the postseason. And Rocky, thank you for bringing up from Mr. October and Jeter being the Mr. November. Reggie Jackson got to a higher level in the postseason, just like Jeter. Jeter never won an MVP because he never had the best stats. He was a really good regular season guy, but when he got to the postseason, you did not want to face Jeter at the plate. Correa is that good. I don't know, Webbs. You know what? Trout's back. Anybody with a back injury scares me, even Correa, because, we're so concerned about the ankle, but nobody has spoken about the back with Correa. He's had back issues too. So if I'd rather not do the deal because of the back injury than an ankle injury that might affect him 8 years down the road. So, at the end of the day, you got to ask yourself one question, and that goes for me as well. I'm not leaving myself out of this because you guys know if I'm going to ask you that question, I'm going to ask myself the same question, even if we have different answers. Do you want to win a World Series? If your final answer is yes, then you have to take risk and you have to do whatever you can do within reason or in your power to put a winning product on there. At the moment, we have players that failed in the postseason. Lindor with Cleveland, pretty damn good. But name me guys around the league or in this Mets team that has a proven track record in the playoffs. And when Alonso, McNeil, and Nimmo finally got in the playoffs, yes, it's only 1 year, and maybe the experience helps them down the road. But we're going into next season, if you don't get Correa, with guys that is not proven in the playoffs and has failed and lost in a wild card round when nobody expected them to. And, well, you know what, Husky? I don't necessarily believe that because I think there's some teams that are in the middle of the pack that are happy with just making the playoffs. And you heard Yankee fans say it over the last couple of years, right? They believe that Hal Steinbrenner is happy just getting to the ALCS, not necessarily winning the World Series. So if Yankee fans believe their owner is happy just making the playoffs, of course the fans shouldn't be. But I don't think any fan, if you have any thought about what's the end goal in this, if it's not a World Series championship, then what are you watching for? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's crazy to me. Like, we haven't won since 86. I wasn't even born yet. Like, my dad seen 2 championships. And it's been a long time for him as well. And no matter what age you are, it's been a long time for you guys as well. I don't care if you're 60, 50, 20, 30. Everybody in any age group as a Mets fan, it's been a long time since the Mets won. Right? Cell phones were just becoming somewhat of a thing. It was just coming at that moment. Internet, all that stuff. Even, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's been a long time, guys. And especially talking to Met fans. I know there's other fans in here, but specifically talking to Met fans, the end goal should be a world championship. If it's not, and you're concerned about 6 years from now, when there's a possibility within this 3-year window to win a World Series, I think you have to go for it. Because the same way we still talk about the 1986 team, 15 years from now, if the Mets have one championship in 15 years, we will be talking about 2023, say, rather than 1986. I think we'd rather be talking about the 2023 World Championship Mets in 2030 than in 2030 talking about the 1986 team still because the Mets still haven't won. That's why it's so important. Because the way we talk about 86, almost 40 years ago, almost, it comes back to the fact that what is the end goal? We all love baseball, right? And all the intricacies in baseball, the smelling of the grass, the views, the sounds, right? The food. It's all fun. But if you only go there for the excitement of just watching a ball game and you're satisfied with the Mets not winning the World Series, because if you weren't pissed last year about what happened to the Mets, then what do the Mets have to do to make you happy? Or do they just have to make the playoffs and you're satisfied? Dor, I understand that. But, I mean, I don't know how old you are, but you've seen world championships. It's a long time ago, even for anybody, whatever age you are. And, again, if you're not happy, no fan should be happy if your team doesn't win the World Series. If the Mets make the NLCS this year and lose, they got a little bit closer, but the end game is to win a World Series. Will you still be excited about the following year? Yes, absolutely. But we still didn't get to the goal that we want. And if your owner's putting a 3 to 5 year winner of the World Series, shouldn't the fans, why are you buying tickets if you're not ready to, or if you're not excited about winning the World Series? Yes, you go to season games. I got season tickets. And, I go to a ton of games. Yeah, I can't go to every game. I do work. But, I try to go as many games as possible. I go on the road, not just with the 7 line, but I go on the road to see baseball games because I love the game of baseball. But I go into every game wanting to win. And that goes for game 1 of the season, game 162, and every game in the playoffs. If you don't have that mentality, then you could still love the game and still want to win. And all the intricacies of the game itself. I'm at the game, I'm strategizing here. I'm like, is Buck going to put in Ottavino in the 8th inning? What are we going to do? Are we going to pinch run? Are we going to pinch hit? If you're a real baseball fan, you talk about this at the game. And even if you're by yourself at the game, you thinking about it in your mind. Real fans think about that. The people who are casual fans think it's boring because they don't know all the little parts of the game and the strategy in the game. Now, the DH took a lot of that out of the National League, but there's still strategy in the game. Are they going to take out Verlander in the 6th to use our bullpen? There's a lot of things that go in between of that. In the 5th inning, I'm thinking about the 8th inning. All right, if the Mets still have this lead, are they going to do Robinson Diaz? Or if the Mets score a couple of runs, are they going to take out the starter early and put the long man in? Or what are they going to do? There's a lot of things to talk about. Yeah, actually, it was great that we had 101 wins, but us not winning the division completely demoralized the fan base. The wild card series, you can just tell, walk into Citi Field during that wild card round, it wouldn't have been, if it was the NLDS instead of the wild card, it would have been a hell of a lot louder and a hell of a lot more passion. It was nice. It was cool to have playoff baseball back there, but a lot of the energy was out of that stadium in that wild card series. You can tell. In game 3, I was at game 3. I was at game 2 and I was at game 3. Game 3 from 5, if you've been to Citi Field, section 525 until I think it was section, whatever the last section is, 532 or something like that, was almost completely empty. That's not a reason. Well, Dor, I love you. I know you're on this channel a lot, but if you're not thinking about World Series, then honestly, what's the point? Maybe because you're satisfied that you've seen World Series in your past, and that's understandable. And I don't have that, so I have a different perspective. But I want to win. I don't see the point of watching sports if you don't want your team to win a World Series. I mean, we got Jet fans in here. Do you just watch the Jets you watch the Jets every year, even though they fail you every single year, but you go into that with some fans went into this year with wow, Zach Wilson can actually be an actual quarterback. and a competent quarterback with the defense and the all the star players they got on offense, all those receivers, they have a chance. And if the Jets find a way to get into the playoffs and they're one and done, are Jet fans going to be happy because they made the playoffs in the first time in 12 years? No, that's not the end goal. If the end goal is only to watch the game and if they win or lose, I can go to sleep at night without thinking about it, then good for you, because I wish I could do that, but I can't. But all right, guys, so we're going to end this right here. I appreciate everybody tuning in for the 2 hours and going back and forth with me, even if we don't agree. There's one thing I don't like to do on this channel, and that's block people. I don't care if you don't disagree and we have difference of opinions. I enjoy that, even if we disagree on every single opinion that we have. If we disagree, I mean, that's the whole point, right? If you can't disagree with people, even if you're a fan of the same team, it's not as fun. It's important to have different perspectives. And that's the reason why I'm bringing somebody else aboard for a weekly show every week, starting in the new year. Baseball Mike, his name's Mike. Good guy, knowledgeable. I trust him with his baseball knowledge. We've had conversations, and I'm going to tell you right now, we don't agree on a lot. We agree on some things, but we don't agree on a lot. And as much as I love doing it with you guys, it's going to be even more fun bringing you guys into this mix with him. And I can assure you probably not agree with everything he says. And for anybody who has a channel that blocks people because they disagree with their take or my take, you don't have thick skin. Mike, wow, I agree. And you know what? I tend to think if you can have disagreements with people and still have a conversation, it's good content. If you block everybody that disagrees with you, what's the point of having a channel? Because all you're doing is having people that agree with you on your channel, and that's not fun, at least to me. I don't care if you guys disagree with me. That doesn't mean you're a bad person. That doesn't mean I can block you. If I block you, what does that say to me? What does that show you? That your opinion does not matter because you don't agree with me. That's crazy to me. I love it. If you disagree with me, let's go. Because even if you disagree, you probably think you're right, and I probably think I'm right. Somebody's wrong, but we won't be right as well. So with that, my point, Mike and the Mad Dog, they barely agreed, and they worked for almost 20 years, right? And listen, I love each and every one of you guys. I appreciate all the support, no matter if it's good conversations, disagreements, doesn't matter. But I'm going to tell you right now, the day I block people because you disagree with me is the day I end my channel, 100%. As long as you're not racist, sexist, or disrespecting people to the point where you're offending people on this channel, in the chat as well, that's the only time I block people. Other than that, bring it, baby. Bring it. So with that said, guys, let's hope we get Correa news tomorrow. That'll be fun. I'm probably not going to do a hot stove tomorrow. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. I'll let you. Again, it'll be up. You guys will know it. But if you get breaking news with Carlos Correa tomorrow, you damn sure I'll be on. So everybody have a good night. Thank you for spending 2 hours with me on this Thursday, December 29th. Hopefully everybody had a good holiday, and hopefully you stay. Hopefully the New Year's, let's hope everybody does some good things. So with that said, everybody have a good night. As always, let's go Mets. See you next time, guys. Have a good night.
Come on! line. We're gonna take it home. Let's go. Do it. Do it. Make it happen. Where there's a Mets man, you'll find a Mets fan. Let's go. This is a Mets year for all your Mets here.